night and in the morning.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to start recording these sessions now. I didn't want to bother with this, but when we start here, so let's see. I believe there was here we go. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll let you guys comment in Telegram rather than take up more time here. If you can make it an hour earlier from now on, I think that would work very well for certainly the people in Europe and close to Asia, obviously. So if you can't, please let me know. We will stay where it's at since everybody's already committed. But I would like for us to be able to accommodate them better. Okay, so we'll start on from here. I believe that Angela was able to, for some reason, she nor I could get the outline done or transferred to you guys.
She
never had
sent
a problem before. Yeah, she sent what she typed up of an older outline for day one. So once you can access that and use that as your outline, excuse me, as we go through. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in, oops, I'm getting a lot of dings here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through for the next hour and a half. We're going to go through as far as we can on the outline. This first day, really, but through the end of the second time is going to be mostly lecture on my part. And then we will get into the exercises as well as lecture. So it will be a mix of things. Okay, so I'm going to share screen here with this presentation. And let's look at, here we go. This was from the most recent one that I did. Okay, sorry. In last month, as a matter of fact, that Anthea was talking about. So this outline, I hope everybody can see this. I want to talk to you guys about some concepts and then some depth of information. So the first thing is the introduction to the concept of rehabilitation. So first of all, what is rehabilitation? So you have to create an environment for trust to occur. Okay, that sounds logical, but to understand what it really is, trust to a dog, not to a human. You understand what you're trying to do. You understand all the noises and actions and behaviors and movements that humans do. That dog does not. So you have to create this environment for trust to occur. The first element in that is predictability. And again, the predictability is about you being predictable to the dog from the dog's viewpoint. Not from your viewpoint and not from a human understanding what humans do. If this dog needs rehabilitation in any way, it already has a distrust of humans. So you have to behave much more calm, predictable, etc. Okay, so your predictability in behavior is the first level that you have to work with. Giving proper signals to the dog before you do something. In other words, looking at the dog, so the dog acknowledges you simply standing up out of the chair then. So now the dog sees, oh, he's checking in with me, he's letting me know something's going to happen. He gets up, okay, I can trust that he's about to do that. and he's going to turn and he's going to walk into another room without coming after me. That's the predictability on a very cursory level that you want to start doing. And so it's acknowledging that number one is you are not a superior being just because you say so. And there isn't another animal on earth that looks at a human and just adores us because we're such a superior animal. Sorry, we don't have speed, we don't have much strength, we don't have big claws or big teeth. They don't look at us that way. They just look at us as another unpredictable, very weird animal. So get over yourself, essentially. You have to have calmness. The composure that you exhibit, that calmness is going to settle down any dog that has a problem with humans, dogs, etc., because you're going to influence through your calmness and composure. Okay. They need an outlet without adrenaline. I can't emphasize this enough. People amp up their dogs, try to get them to play, all these other things. You simply become an outlet to feed the wrong part of the brain and the wrong neurotransmitters. They will not learn what you're trying to teach them. What they will learn is that you're simply a vehicle for excitement. That's all. And excitement is prey, predatory action for them. That's the way they see the world. So the outlets without adrenaline are things that we will talk about and some of the exercise that you will get. So we'll go on for that. Structure for the dog. Structure isn't putting him in a kennel and having him sit on a placemat for 20 hours, or that's not structure. The structure is the routine that you do on a daily and a weekly and a monthly basis with that dog so that it can count on something. It's got to be predictable again. So the routine, if you can live within a predictable routine, you can become comfortable in that routine and start trusting. Because without trust, nothing happens. You don't learn, or you learn to distrust. And what we're trying to do is reach each and every dog that we ever are around or work with, okay? Provide leadership in the way that dogs understand it. Leadership is not taken. Leadership is observed by your behavior and trusted and then followed. So a natural leader is followed because of their behavior, their trustworthiness, their intellect, their whatever. Okay, that's what leaders are. Leaders do not use dominance to take over. That's not a leader. Okay. So this is critical for you to understand the concept of rehabilitation, of becoming predictable. How do you become predictable? You make sure that the dog understands by your behaviors that you are not a threat to the dog, and you don't ever see a dog as a threat to you. That's something that humans have to really wrap their mind around deeply. My background in, we'll just say stuff, martial arts and all sorts of government stuff. I fear no human on earth, truly, and I fear no dog ever. And it's not because I'm a big, bad, tough guy, although some people think I am. It's because I have the confidence to understand that I can handle any situation to some extent. Even if I get injured or die, I'm still simply going to handle the situation. And so once you come to terms with your own mortality, by all rights, frankly, I should have been dead many times over in places I've been around the world and what I've done. So every day is a gift, and that's the way you need to look at it. Every day, every moment's a gift. And if you're around a dog that doesn't trust you, if you are self-confident, and what that means is not cocky. If you're self-confident, you understand yourself, you know that you are trying to communicate properly, you should have no fear, because fear begets more distrust. Matter of fact, human emotion is the worst thing that you can use around a dog, period. In course 2, we go into it a little bit. In course 4, we go into it much more in depth. In course 5, certainly more in depth, about dog emotions versus human emotions, and what level dogs do have emotions, and how humans project human emotion, learned emotions, onto dogs and screw things up badly. Okay. So it's really about respecting a dog for who and what it is. So continuing, we're trying to create a balanced dog. First thing is, you have to understand what a balanced dog is. Everybody has their idea of what a balanced dog is for themselves, but that's not a balanced dog. That's what a human wants. So we have to understand what a balanced dog really is. It's a dog that makes appropriate decisions almost 100% of the time. What's an appropriate decision? Well, it has to be a pro-social decision to the group. So understanding whatever group it's with, being comfortable with that group, and making a decision for itself properly to integrate with the group, whether that's humans, dogs, cats, birds, it doesn't matter what it is. So the entities around it. So a dog that makes those appropriate decisions. How much percentage of your day do you want to have to, quote unquote, command or tell a dog what to do? I don't want to at all. I want to be able to communicate to them so that they understand what proper decisions are on their part, and then they are looking for more accurate decisions that line and that way. That's what we're trying to do in teaching relationship-based training, behavior modification, etc., is to help the dog make the appropriate decisions by how we behave. So a non-adrenalized, calm, and pack-oriented dog. Okay, so I'm going to address this, the big elephant in the room about this new age BS about dogs are not pack animals. Of course they are. Dogs are social animals. They want to be with another, regardless of the species. Therefore, that pro-social, that sociality aspect means, just like humans, we want to be around other humans. And that creates a social animal. A dog is a social animal. We have a name we call social animals: a herd, a flock, a gaggle, a pack. That's just a word describing a social unit of a specific species. So this new age BS about dogs are not pack animals is ridiculous. It's again trying to change the meaning of words, and that creates a lack of communication and proper understanding. So I'm telling you flat out, dogs are pack animals. Not all of them. They don't have a choice when they're in humans' hands. They don't have a choice as to who they go with. So a lot of times there's a mismatch, but that doesn't mean they're not a pack animal. Okay. So got that out of the way. You want a non-fearful dog, because a non-fearful dog is in its own mind. So a fearful dog, whether it's aggressive or whether it is fearful, terrified, etc., that animal is going to make decisions based upon what it believes is going to happen. It's in its own mind. It is not in reality. So in fact, it's more human-like in its decision-making than dog-like. And that's a problem, because humans are always in their own mind, thinking about the future, the past, what they need to do next. What does, what color of shoe do I wear? All of those stupid things that humans do, instead of being in nature and in reality and understanding what's going on around them, not from a fear base. And so we want a dog, a balanced dog is one that is aware of its surroundings without being fearful of them. So in other words, they are in reality and they simply respond well. That way they can make appropriate decisions. Okay. We want self-confidence without cockiness. There's a huge difference between those two things. Self-confident doesn't mean it has to show anything. It's simply happy within its own skin. Okay. That's what self-confident means. Dog comfortable with its place in the social order. So a dog that's comfortable with its place in the social order is a non-social climber. It doesn't have to take over. It doesn't have to try to one up anybody else. It doesn't have to show up. That doesn't mean it's not in competition in a proper way, for instance, in play. That's part of a social interaction, but it's still comfortable within its place, okay? And it doesn't matter what level that is. And by the way, having worked and lived with dogs, wolves, etc., this whole BS about the omega and the alpha and all that stuff is the biggest disservice I've ever seen to understanding animals. And actually the guy who came up with all of that, Konrad Lorenz, on the alpha male and all that BS, was about Nazism. That's what that was all about. And he later in the 1950s recanted all of that, but unfortunately it infused itself, especially in the dog world. I will tell you, having worked with wolves for many, many years, that's it. What you see on TV or movies or stuff, it doesn't happen. It's just, it doesn't exist. They spend 5 or 10 years getting film to make a story, to make a 1 hour interesting thing. Otherwise, if you watched 10 years of film of wolf packs, you would understand that that stuff really just doesn't happen. They wouldn't exist. So, okay. So that's
Can I comment on that real quickly? Because
yes,
I've heard that that has been observed within packs in, sorry, I can't think of the word, but like zoos, in
captivity is
man-made
different than
structures.
natural.
And that, okay, and so that's been observed, but that's like, unfortunately, it's been seen as that's normal behavior, but that's really like a pack under stress, and and shouldn't be seen as healthy pack behavior.
Correct. I will tell you, having worked with those animals for many, many years, the equivalent of you putting a dog in a tiny crate is putting a wolf in 1,600 square foot enclosure by itself. That's the stress level, that's the containment level of mentality difference. And any wolf that is in captivity is a completely stressed environment. They don't get to choose who they're with, or they don't get to choose much of anything. So you're working with an extremely intelligent animal, 4 or 5 times as intelligent as any dog, about the equivalent of a 19-year-old human in intelligence, and you're putting them in captivity in their entire life and not allowing them to be who they and what they are. But working with and living with wolves in the wild, completely different behaviors and understanding. They are family social units, and it's nothing like what humans have quote unquote studied. There's only a few people who have ever gone out and actually lived with the wolves to study them and understand them to the point where they see that, because nobody else is going to, dedicate 2 or 3 years of their lives to sit with a wolf pack and walk around and hunt with them and become part of that. Jason Budreeds, Dr. Budreeds, is one of those guys that did that. Raised, oh gosh, I don't remember how many, like 73 wolf pups in his Soviet flat over the years. Introduced them, lived with them for a couple of years out in the mountains and taught them to avoid humans. He's the premier wolf biologist in the world, and a friend of
Jason
Budreeds.
How do you spell?
Badrice.
Sorry. I'm really interested in bringing wolf biology into my story and journey. So I want to talk to more wolf biologists eventually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I did some of that, but I focused on canine dogs, not on wolves. He's the preeminent wolf biologist in the world. I could introduce you to another friend of mine, Mike Phillips. Mike is a wolf biologist. He was the head of the Red Wolf Project back in '92 to reintroduce red wolf. He worked with David in Yellowstone to reintroduce the wolves there. So Mike's in Montana right now, but just sharp guy. So again, I can introduce you.
I'll send you a personal email at some point. But
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. I'll work with wolves and wolf dogs if people want, but that's not my thing anymore. I know enough, obviously, that I can help humans understand that. So anyway, canine rehabilitation methodology is what I used to call this many years ago. And it sounds like a university course, so nobody was interested. So I started changing. That was the book that I was writing. Again, what I tell my clients every time was, I want you to listen to each word. If you want to learn how to talk to your dog, shut your mouth. Doesn't mean you can't say anything. It just gives you a different perspective of what you're actually saying to the dog with yourself, not your monkey chatter. Okay. So I came up with a little acronym years ago, TICK, TIC. So time is the first thing, the human time concept. Our brains work different ways. We have outer layers of the cerebral cortex, and our concepts of time are different. We have generally long lives, and because of our language capabilities and recording things down, we can see what 500 generations ago people were thinking, doing, et cetera, et cetera. So we have recorded and beyond history, 15,000 years of human civilization. And yes, it does go back that far. At least now we're looking at 17,000 years that civilization started that long ago. But human history as hunter-gatherers for, frankly, hundreds of thousands of years. And that's what we were. We were hunter-gatherers, mainly hunters. And so we became a top predator. But our time concept is we can think back to, the big expansion 13.6 billion years ago, and we can project out 400 billion years ahead of time. As far as we know, we're the only species on Earth that can do that. Although we don't know that much about the cetacean brain. They're huge. They're extremely intelligent. That's a dolphin. I did that on purpose. Anyway. And so the human time concept is one beyond our own lives, even beyond our own species, to understand beginning of time, end of time type of scenarios. And we've tried to define time, we measure it, we do all sorts of things, which clouds over a lot of our understanding of each day and each week and each season now. When we lived as hunter-gatherers, we understood time differently. Now we have an expectation of, an 80-year life instead of 20 years, maybe, if we didn't get, chewed to pieces by some saber-toothed cat. So very different. I looked up, as a matter of fact, last year, maybe the year before, I studied a little bit on violent deaths through history for humans. We live at the time right now, including all wars, everything else, we live in a time where the percentage of humans that die through violent death is the lowest in all of history. Tiny, tiny percentage, much less than 1%, much less than 1/100% of humans that live die by violent death right now. Whereas back 2,000 to 6,000 years ago, 40 to 60% of the population died through violent deaths. So your expectation of life, living, reality, all of those things has been skewed to expect everything to be good, and that we have a long life and we can do these things, et cetera, instead of being in that moment. So our minds are cluttered with other things rather than just the survival of reality. Dogs, however, generally still live in reality. So their concept of time is right now. And so a dog that doesn't behave properly in the way that we accept as a dog is actually a dog in its own mind instead of in reality. So they're a lot like humans in that their minds are cluttered and clouded with expectations that aren't necessarily real, generally aren't. I asked, I think the last class that I taught, class 4, where does frustration come from? Frustration comes from you expecting something and it not happening. The expectation was unreal in the first place because it's not reality. So your frustration comes from the fact that you're not in reality. And that's what happens with dogs a lot, is their frustration, their anger, all of those things they get in their own mind and they have an expectation that may or may not be real. And so what we have to do is we have to show them reality, show them reality and be able to get them back to enjoying themselves in that moment. And that's really what this whole system is about, is having them join us in reality in that moment and enjoying it through the behaviors that we do, the activities we do together, the relationship we have. So, okay, that's a shortened version. Work with what's in front of you. I know every trainer in the world's used that, said that, but they don't understand what's in front of them. If they don't understand what the brain of the dog is and how the dog communicates, how to communicate to the dog, how it thinks, what its motivations are, all of that stuff. That's what it means to work with what's in front of you, is understanding that particular dog, that breed, that species, period. Okay. So that's the time. Intent, if you take nothing else except this from this class, your intent is everything. It's not the, pardon me for those of you in California, I don't mean this in an insulting way, but this is not California ephemeral energy, man. Oh, wow. It's not that at all. It's literally what you project. You are what all matter is, all what we consider solid things. All matter is frozen energy. That's all it is. So we're literally made up of frozen energy. Heat coming from us is energy. The light that comes to us that's reflected off things, that's another form of energy. Energy is all through us, all around us, etc. And we project that to animals that sense that. You can too. You're just so full in your mind of everything else that you don't understand that. And that's what I'm looking for, is the calmness, the composure within yourself, no fear, no nothing, to where you can actually see what that individual is that's standing in front of you. What is intent? Intent is what is in your mind this instant. It's not about intention. Those are two completely different words. Intention is a future tense. I mean to do this. Doesn't mean it'll happen. Doesn't mean that you actually will have that intent. Intent is what's in your mind now, this split second. And that's the energy that you project because of your intent. If your intent does not align with what you're projecting in your body, in your position, your stance, your eyes, the way you sound, all of those things, then that dog, that animal is not going to trust you, period, because it doesn't make sense to them. You're lying to them, essentially. So what's in your mind in that moment should not be, I want you to do this. What your intent in your mind is, I am this. I'm confident in myself. I'm comfortable. I don't see you as a threat, and I'm not posing myself as a threat. Now, where can we go from here? We've got to deal with each other. That's the intent that you should begin with. And then the rest of the intent is to gain a safe, clear, structured beginning of communication with that animal. And doing things together begets trust. So that's the human intent I want. The dog intent is, again, we want them to be in reality and sense things in reality. Anything that is reactive or fearful is something that has been learned, that needs to be unlearned to trust themselves and to trust you around them. I will tell you that probably 99.9% of the behavior cases that I got over the years were because the dog did not trust the human to handle anything, because the human couldn't handle anything. Why? Because human didn't understand what the dog was concerned about, because the human only saw things from its standpoint, not from the dog's standpoint, period. And so that's the gap of miscommunications that I see between humans and dogs. Dogs think a certain way. They see things that the humans don't even respond to, don't acknowledge, nothing. And the dog says, you're an idiot. I've got to take over for my safety. And if you're tied to me, I also have to amp it up, because now I've got to protect you. Otherwise, I'm just dragging a dead body around. That's where a lot of leash reactivity comes from, is the dog doesn't trust you to handle it, and you can't, mostly because of the way you think about things. And the dog is very aware of what it sees as threats, and you're not. So those are the issues that I always saw with my clients. And once I cleared that up for them, they didn't have problems. So commitment is the C part of this. The human commitment should be for you increasing knowledge, providing guidance, working with proper communication with the dog. You have to know what that is, obviously, first. Recognizing the individual that you're working with. That is an individual, living, sentient being. It's an intelligent animal. Don't look down upon it, and don't think of yourself as superior. Think of yourself as a partner trying to communicate. So it is about partnership, and then whatever it takes. I've never, ever given up on a dog. Years. I've worked with a dog for years to rehabilitate them. Dog commitment is understanding your intent, acceptance of that, and having pro-social behavior. We'll define pro-social here in a little while, another day, and then having a partnership together. And that's really what social animals look for, as a partner, not a dominant, submissive situation. They're looking for a partner they can trust, because that partnership, depending on the situation, can go back and forth as to who is the superior in that split second. I can climb a tree, a dog can't, but a dog can outrun me to get to the squirrel if it's on the ground. So it's fluid, it's always fluid, and you need to understand that and recognize those situations. Okay. The K part is knowledge, human knowledge. First aspect is understanding canine language. And if you understand the dogs and you begin to see that, you will be able to start shaping your behaviors and your communication to be more clear with your dog. Okay. It's simple, and yet it's still complicated. We want communication. We need to know about the motivations, behaviors, and capabilities of each dog we work with, certainly by breed. And you also have to have reasonable expectations of that dog. A simple example I give is, you can't expect a dachshund to jump over a 4-foot fence. And you can't expect a husky to not jump over a 4-foot fence. So having reasonable expectations of that particular animal is going to help you understand where to guide and help. Okay, so that's our knowledge. So that's the TICK part. Dog knowledge is first, all of those things, but trust of others based upon experience and program behavior, learned behaviors. That's the first thing. They either trust or don't trust based upon their experiences and program behaviors. Now we have to give them learned behaviors that counter that. Much of the time, when I was working with a dog, I gave them an immediate opposite response of what they always got. That stopped them dead in their tracks because their communication wasn't working then. And they'd always gotten the right response from a human. If they're barking at them, growling, or whatever else, the human backs up, that's what they wanted. When I move forward at them, they've got to stop that and try to communicate in a different way. So giving a dog an opposite response when you disagree with its behavior, and again, if you're working with a fearful dog, you certainly don't want to scare the heck out of that dog. That's not what I'm talking about. But you give them an opposite response of disinterest rather than, I'm terrified of you, et cetera, et cetera. Most of the time, the disinterest, not feigning it, but, and it isn't that you're not interested, but most of the time, a non-response is more effective working with a dog that doesn't communicate well or has expectations of humans of being idiot primates. So when you're able to communicate that I'm nonplussed by your entreaties, that dog has to stop what it's doing, think, and then try to communicate in a different way. Now we can have a conversation, because if you're stuck in your behavior already, I've got to change that behavior by a different communication. Okay, so then we start guiding. We're looking for ways to communicate to each other. That's where some of you have had the opportunity to work with me with what I call the 20-second walk. First 20 seconds of taking a leash. And all of the thousands of things that you could try within that first 20 seconds, you can try 10 to 12 different things that are going to tell you whether that dog communicates well with that particular thing or not. And so it gives us a starting point to start communicating. That's an important element that I'm focusing more on now, especially with trainers, but also with clients, is to work with understanding what you're communicating and how to elicit a response from the dog that tells you whether that works well or works poorly. And now I work on those 4 or 5 things that work well as a communication. Now we have a basis of language to start. Okay. I hope that makes sense, guys. Obviously, we're not going to do a pack walk. That's one of the things that we miss out on, not being together. But I'm going to explain a little bit about this. I'll draw an illustration. Sorry, Bosch. Hang on. Sorry, buddy. I've got my little whiteboard. And I'm going to stop sharing that. Hopefully you can, I don't know if you can blow up my picture or not. So I do pack walks differently than other people, apparently. I've developed a number of ways to do this over the years so that you can actually create your own. I ask for people to generally have a minimum of 6 feet and no more than 10 feet between individuals. And I want the leash to be no more than 2 to 3 feet in length. Because by the time a dog starts moving and your arm length and the dog in front of you that's coming at each other starts getting too close. So what we're trying to look for first is safety. Second is respect in space and time, which we'll go over probably in next class a little bit more about what space is and what it means. But first, what we generally do when we're in a group is to line up human-dog combinations in a linear fashion so that we have dogs and humans this way. And what I ask generally, and I let the people determine it themselves for their own dog, what they feel about their dog. So the ones that are the most balanced, we're going to have them up front. The ones that are the least balanced, whatever that means to you, reactive, aggressive, fearful, they're in the back. And then medium ones in the middle. Okay. And so what happens is then we start going that direction. So the ones that are the examples up front of the most balanced, they're in front, they're leading. And so all of these other dogs, they're looking back and forward and stuff. The faster the human gets into understanding the walk, looking forward, looking around, not looking down at their dog, not looking all these other places. When they see the environment, when the human looks out at the environment and scans and enjoys themselves, watch the leaves, watch the birds, listen to stuff, walk, just walk, just enjoy the walk. The faster the human does that, the faster the dog gets into the mode. The human is influencing the dog. Here's what happens, guys. Either you influence the dog or the dog influences you. That's all there is. You are only responsible for you and your dog, nobody else. I don't want more than 10 feet. If we start getting 12 feet, a 12-foot gap, say, between these guys, right there, we just created two packs, two separate packs in the same territory. Two packs of predators in the same territory is not a good idea. Predators do not share territory. So by you separating yourselves, you're saying don't trust them. And these guys are going, oh, they're hanging back. We can't trust them. The whole idea of space and time and movement is caught up with this. You have to maintain that 6 to 10 foot interval between each. If you get too much of a gap, now they see that they're two separate packs, and that's not good. That's not what you're trying to do. So we go in a linear fashion. We'll go around things, etc. The guys in back see everybody. They're following everybody else in front. They're going in the same pattern, so they get the idea. Okay, we're all together. So we are literally creating a pack of humans and dogs in that moment. It's a momentary thing, but the faster the humans get into that mindset, the faster the dogs settle, even the ones that are very reactive at the back. Okay. At some point, then we stop, turn around. Now let's go. So the back of the pack, the ones that were more reactive, less balanced, etc., now they're leading. Well, of course, these guys back here became comfortable watching the guys in front of them and trusting the guy behind them. Now it's reversed. So now, well, wait a minute, I was able to watch him. Now he's behind me. So dogs start looking back. If the human goes, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, I trust this situation, the dog joins them quickly. Okay. So now these, yes.
Just a question about the gap. If you have someone as a human that is somehow not as fast physically, yes, or so, what are you doing then? Do you put them at the end, or do you put them up front? Or
generally, if they have, for instance, if it's a weak person, poor reaction time, and a large dog, they're going to be at one end of the other. Yes. And we're going to give them about 10 to 12 feet so that there is some time. And generally, I'm going to watch them pretty darn closely. I'll probably hang around with them because I'll handle the situation for them if I need to. Okay. Good question. So as we go the other way, now these dogs that were behind, they start realizing, hey, we're leading now. We can do this too. When the dogs in the back who are the most balanced, they don't care anyway. At some point we stop. I'll take the center out, move that to the front. These guys come up behind, and I'm showing the dogs and the humans, anybody can lead. Okay, let's go. And you just go like this. Okay. So you're saying anybody can lead this pack. You can trust anyone behind you and anyone else in front of you. That's what you're doing is, bless you, Stacy. And so we trail through, we go in a linear fashion for this first one. We do different pack walks after that first one. But what we're trying to do, generally also, when I meet up with a group, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shake people's hands, hug them. I'm going to touch their dog, and I'm creating a pack through scent. So each dog gets to smell all the humans and all the other dogs, get that scent on them, which creates a mental picture in their mind, which 25% of their brain is about scent, guys. That's their universe. That's their eyes. That's how we use our eyes. That's how they use their nose. Okay. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a mental situation for them to smell all the dogs and humans for that group. So you create the pack through the touch, through the smell, through the scent, through the sharing of that. Okay. So that's kind of the first pack walk, and you can change up, you can change directions. You can change speed. So all of a sudden you trot, everybody instantly goes together. You don't want a caterpillar type situation where it runs out and then bumps together. You've got to stay in the same spacing. Okay. And so, you know, you can loop, you can do all sorts of things. You can go in a long distance and come back, but you're switching the locations, but you're not switching the intent. The intent of the human is we're enjoying this. This is what we're going to do. They don't look at the dog. When you look at a dog, you're putting the dog in charge. You're saying, what do I do? That's what you're telling your dog. I don't know what to do. I'm looking to you for direction. Stop looking at your dog. You're giving them carte blanche. Instead, if you are looking out and scanning and see the environment, the dog knows that you're aware of all of that. Okay, does that make sense? I hope so, because I see so many people looking at their dogs constantly. And generally it's because they don't trust their dog. Dog doesn't know that. The dog simply sees you as a weak pack member that doesn't know what's going on and looking to them for direction. Okay. So stop looking at your dog. They don't have the answers. You do. Have them follow you and enjoy. Okay. All right. Let's get back to. Oh. Okay. Well, so there we go. Okay. I lost you guys there for a second. Sorry. Okay, we're going to start into this. I know we only have about 40 minutes left on this particular session. I try to limit it to 3 hours for a number of reasons, just attention span and information levels and all of that. So we'll go in, we'll start into this. I don't know that we'll get all the way through this, but it's important for you to understand, to have a respect for these animals, of who they are, what they come from, and how they have survived for literally tens of millions of years as what they are. So it's, you know, we look at Fluffy and think it's a cute little puppy, when in fact it's a canine predator that's been around for tens of thousands of years in that form. And we need to respect that these animals have survived as well as humans have. Okay. So canine history DNA. So canine background comes from a wolf background. Pardon me while I close this door here. And my buddy Bosch is here at my feet under my desk, where he usually is. Hey, buddy. Bosch is my 1.5-year-old German Shepherd, and actually he has about 7% wolf in him. So he's slightly more intelligent, but makes him a unique individual. And the litter that I was working with, I didn't intend to get a dog, but ended up, they adopted out 7 of the 8, 4 of them at service to working dog level intelligence. I analyzed them and worked with them for several weeks, about a month, I think, month and a half. And Bosch was always at the top of the list for everything and intelligence and capabilities. They were concerned about who he would go to and what he would become because he's so intelligent. So they asked me to work with him to develop him into a working dog for about 3 months, and I agreed to. Unfortunately, at the end of the first month, I turned to my wife and I said, he's ours, he's not going anywhere. That was not my intent, but that's my buddy Bosch. So, all right. So canine background, I want you to understand that dogs did not come from modern wolves. There have been throughout history many, many sister lines of wolf canine backgrounds. So these sister lines have been created through genetic mutation, have died out through hundreds of thousands of years. And what became dogs came from a sister line of what became modern gray wolf too. So modern gray wolf, a split and a sister line that went for about 100,000 years and then started becoming more proto-dog, dog-like. So that's what we know now from genetics, from archaeology, finds, all sorts of things. So human interaction began about 40 to 45,000 years ago with these animals. And the reason it didn't happen much until then, if at all, we have no archaeological evidence that it happened before 41,000 years ago, but it was already in a mode where those animals were living with humans as partners at 41,500 years ago. So that takes several thousand years to get there. So we're estimating that it was about 45,000 years ago, which makes perfect sense from timelines and understanding how long it takes for something to happen. I'm drawing a quick map of the world. So bear with me here for a second, because it's important for you to understand a couple of things. Okay, so here's the world, at least Asia, Africa, and Europe. Okay, so Spain over here, Kamchatka over here, Japan, China, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so quick illustration from Spain. So about 45,000 years ago, that last glacial maximum ice age, this was where the permanent ice was, right here. And from Spain, right over here, all the way over through this massive area up to the Himalayas, this was a grassland steppe area. And that grassland steppe area was where most of the major flora fauna, the mega flora fauna, was. So the giant sloths, the mammoths, the mastodons, all of those, and the animals that hunted them too. So the wolves, the saber cats, all of those different animals that were predators. Humans at this time had come into what is modern day Azerbaijan and this area, and had occupied this area for actually about 10,000 years up to this point. Saudi Arabia, what's modern Saudi Arabia, down into India and over into Southeast Asia. So at about 45,000 years ago, through our genetics, we understand that there was break into the Central Asia area, about 35,000 years ago over here, and about 45,000 years ago into modern Europe. And so this area where this sister line of wolf and gray wolf and all the other sister lines of wolves were, this is where we bumped into those animals hunting the same animals that we were. And so studying each other, going after the same prey, what happens is that a particular line of wolf is more curious, less wary of humans, watches us hunt en masse, where we would run an entire herd of mammoths off of a cliff and they would die. And then we would go down as a group, cut what we could, take the meat, and leave a bunch of the rest of it. And those wolves that followed us then started having massive caches of meats left over from us where we left it, and they didn't have to do anything for it. They didn't have to get stomped, killed, all that stuff, maimed, trying to hunt something down. So they would follow us, and at the same time, we noticed that their senses, their abilities, their speed, their hearing, their scent capabilities, they could alert us to a lot of things, including where that herd is over the mountain range that we can't hear, see, smell. And so we began cooperating together as a co-species, much like ravens work with wolves now. So we started operating as a co-species with each other to survive better. And they had senses and capabilities we didn't. We were intelligent, we watched them, we followed them. They would take us to those, and we started hunting together. And so that trust started building over thousands of years of that. And that's how we got a sister line of wolf that became a proto-dog that started living with us, around us and with us. It wasn't about some campfire 7,000 years ago BS that we used to be taught 45, 30, 50 years ago. That's not what happened. So that's how we bumped into this sister line of wolf that was not as wary as modern grays of us, began to cooperate, and that's how we got a partner of a canine. So that's the oldest partner that humans have partnered with as another species by tens of thousands of years. We both survived better together and became cooperative partners. That's the respect I want you to have for these guys. That's why I want you to understand that. Okay. So obviously with human interaction and our capability of selecting one proto-dog over another to breed with something, we started breeding for characteristics that helped us more to protect, to hunt, to be faster, to see better, to smell better, all of these things. And that's how we got specializations. I will tell you that almost all, there are 4 clades of genetics in dogs. A, B, C, and D is what we call them. And 64% of dogs, which are the modern European dogs, are in that first clade A. those dogs, almost all dogs on Earth came from this Central Asian core that replaced the ancient European core between, we're looking at probably 20 to 25,000 years ago, started replacing that. So the ones that traded, had ideas, et cetera, they saw the ones that from Central Asia they were more malleable, more cooperative with humans than the ones the original Europeans started working with. So those don't exist anymore because they got replaced by the Central Asian dogs. We'll call them dogs at this point, okay? So base breeds and characteristics. We need to understand that there are 11 to 13, depending on how you categorize it, what we call ancient breeds. Those ancient breeds are Siberian Huskies, Malamutes, Asian Doles. There's Sighthounds. Some of them go back 5,000 years. Some of them go back about 35,000 years. That's the Siberian Husky. It's the oldest breed on Earth, continuous breed on Earth. It has been changed. It's been influenced by humans a lot over the years, but they're about as ancient and primal a breed as you can get. Okay, doesn't mean aggressive or anything else. It means the mentality of it. So this is evolution of vertebrates. Okay, and if you look at the timeline, if you look from the top, you'll see that the vertebrate family started with lampreys, goes to rays, sharks, down to lungfish, salamanders, frogs, platypi, and then we get into the break of from platypi down. We begin seeing there's a lot of mammalians in here as well as reptilians. So we've got platypi, elephants, bats. If you see, wolves and cows are very close together. And then we've got the human, chimpanzee, mice, rats, lemur group here. See, our ancestor about 80 million years ago was this little tiny thing that was about that size that looked like a mouse. That's our ancestor. Over the years, being an architect and designer, I have studied what passes for beauty, both in architecture and in natural things. And our sensibilities of what is beautiful to us, what's a beautiful animal look like? Everybody looks at a wolf and says, gosh, that's a gorgeous animal. Why? What is it about that animal that we think is beautiful? Human perception. And same thing with some of the pets that we have, et cetera, et cetera. And then we get into, primates and primate behavior, the chimpanzees, the lemurs, the humans, et cetera. And going back tens of millions, 20 million years, it appears that, by the way, if you didn't know, that our language base, literally our verbal language base, goes back about 20 million years. There's a genetic mutation that happened with primates at that point. And so our ability to speak and think in terms of language happened through genetic mutation at least 20 million years ago. Then you get into turtles, snakes, lizards, crocodiles, birds, etc., which birds obviously are from those are modern day dinosaurs, what's left over of dinosaurs. So this is the evolution of vertebrates and the split off of groups. This is specific predatory animal lines. So the specialization of animals, the Miasic line goes back about 55 million years ago. Very successful, the second most successful predatory line of animals that ever been on Earth, second only to Borophagus. The Miasic line lasted millions of years, then eventually died out. So Miasis was a very effective predator. Hyanodon was one of those line. Again, 42 to 25 million years ago. That's a number, tens of millions of years this animal existed quite well. Cynodictys, this is, we know now, the Cynodictys is the first what we would consider canine. It goes back 37 million years. And so canines came into being as a unique species with Cynodictys. Leptocyon was another evolutionary line on Cynodictys. Leptocyon, very successful fox-like and fox-size canine predator. Then we had Amphicyon as a separate line. Again, successful for 10 million years. Very large, very large animal. Tomarctus, back when I was studying this about 50 years ago, that was the first one that we knew of that we had archaeological records and could identify as a canine. So this was what I learned 50 years ago. That was the first quote unquote canine or dog, wolf. Now we know it goes back more than double that time through Cynodictys. Okay. So Tomarctus was again an evolutionary line towards what would be modern canines. Alurodon is another one. You see it more almost cat-like, almost beak-like in its skull, although it was a canine. Apicion, this was a 150-pound animal. It was not one you wanted to mess with. Very successful predator. Eucyon is another one. Again, very successful for 5 million years. This is Borophagus. Borophagic line actually goes almost 40 million years to about 2 million years ago. Borophagus itself was the kind of penultimate aspect of it, goes from 12 to 2 million years ago. And the entire Borophagus line died out 2 million years ago. So it was the most widespread, most successful, most numerically, and widest range of animals, but it died out 2 million years ago. Canis dirus, what you know as the dire wolf, was not as large as some of the modern gray wolves. Hollywood got it wrong again, always. And but it existed for almost 1 million years, up to about 16,000 years ago. You know, what happened 16,000 years ago? Frankly, it was the end of the Ice Age, and what they hunted died off at that time, and therefore what they hunted wasn't existing, so they died off. They couldn't eat. Humans had very little to do with their downfall. Humans are always blaming humans for stuff like that, but in fact, it's just nature. Modern gray wolf, say 700,000 to current, because they look the same then as now. They actually go back about 1 million years. So the modern gray wolf that became that line and that identifiable gray wolf, and that's all of the lines, as a matter of fact, go back about 1 million years. The Mexican gray wolf is the one that I was involved with and still am trying to recover territory for its existence. We're now up to 161 in the wild. They only exist in the Sierra Madre of northern Mexico, about 35 of them. The rest in southern New Mexico and Arizona. They are protected there, even though about 60% of those that die are actually killed by humans deliberately, which big federal fines and stuff like that for people that do that. They still do it. So this is the second most dire, almost not an existent species on Earth, the first being the red wolf. This is the Gila wilderness, the Gila in the Blue Range, the Gila's in New Mexico, Blue Range is in Arizona. That's where they live. It's a very rugged and isolated environment, and not many people out there, so it's perfect for the gray wolf. There's the red wolf. There's actually down to, I believe, 6 to 8 in the wild right now in North Carolina that are considered pure red wolf, although we've found residual populations of even high content red wolf here in Texas and Louisiana. So they still sort of exist. The ones that are that have been in captivity to try to breed. Doesn't seem like U.S. Fish and Wildlife is as interested in these as they are the Mexican gray. So that's a shame. The modern North American coyote, wherever we've killed off the wolf, the coyotes come in and thrive. Whenever we try to kill off coyotes, they actually produce more. So management of coyotes is leave them alone, reintroduce wolves in areas, and the wolves chase out the coyotes. Coyotes, there's millions of them in North America. There's 2,000 living in downtown Chicago alone. And so they're very successful. They're kind of like rats. Wherever humans went and wiped everything else out, they came in behind them. So here's a coyote jackal hybrid. There's a coyote versus a wolf in actual size. Now, the ones that we have here in Texas have been affected by the red wolf. And so that mixture of coyote and red wolf, this is a typical coyote size and is typically around 30 pounds. The red wolf is around 65 pounds, so about the size of a German Shepherd. The one that was captured that I was asked to go look at and take samples and stuff was 62.5 pounds. It was a red wolf here in Dallas area. So he escaped. So I'm black saddle jackal. Reason I'm going through these, I want you to see how many different types of species of canines there actually are. There's a modern red fox. There's a South American Maine fox. The South American canids are very odd compared to the rest of the world because there was little contact for tens of thousands of years. This is the tallest. These guys stink to high heaven, by the way. They really do. They smell. Australian dingoes. We used to think they were original to the Aborigines that came across the land bridges back 60,000 years ago. That's not the case. They did have some sort of a proto-dog with them, but those animals were entirely replaced by a population of the South Asian Dole from India when Indian sailors came to Australia about 3,000 years ago. So the modern dingoes are actually cousins to the Dole. And there's the Asiatic Dole. You can see the similarities there. So South American bush dog, not a dog. That's what they call it. Okay. So I know you can't read this very well. Let me see if I can blow that up a little bit. Is that a little better? Hopefully. So what this does, we go from the far left was the Eocene, then it goes to the Oligocene, the Miocene, the Pliocene, Pleistocene, Holocene. Okay, so these are the different time periods. These little tick marks underneath them, so it's 36, 32, 28, 24. Those are millions of years ago. That's how long ago it was when these animals exist. So the Hespersion line is the top line, the top. There's three major sections. So Hespersion was the first one. And you see it lasted. It was a very interesting, we'll call it canid predatory aspect, okay, because it goes back about 36 million years ago. So Hesperus had a number of different varieties, and they lasted till about 14, 15 million years ago. Then you have the borophagic line, is the next split off. And so you've got everything from Archaeon all the way down to Borophagus. You got a Piscion and those others that I showed you in there as well. You see how wide a variety of animals and the number and the length of time. So they go from about 35, 36 million years ago to up to about 2 million years ago when Borophagus finally died out. At the bottom here, well, that's about as much as that's going to increase apparently. Then you have the canine line, which is Leptosian is the first of those. Off of that, then you see the first split off are the vulpes and the canine. Vulpes are the foxes, so the ones on top here are all the fox-like animals. On the canid side, the lower section, you see the South American canines and Eucyon all existed at the same time, started from a same source. And then you've got all the others down below, the jackals, the coyotes, the wolves, all of those, kuons. Okay, so that's the history of what became canids. Okay, there we go. This was a study done by Dr. Elaine Ostrander and her partner at the National Institute of Health, based upon finding that dogs share more than 300 diseases with humans, more than any other species on Earth. And because of that, they wanted to study the genome of dogs. It was something they wanted to see what diseases, what genetics, what mutation caused what, and how we coast. That's why I say we are a co-species. We exist together. We both were more successful with each other than without. So we actually have developed as a co-species. So anyway, this was a 2012 publishing of the genome. You can see over on the left-hand side, the coyote, the Western coyote, most pure of the coyotes. And as you come around towards the east, you start seeing there's the red wolf, which is, there's a lot of coyote genetics, but there's a lot of other wolf genetics and a unique wolf genetic in there. And then you get the Great Lakes canids, which are wolf and some minor coyote mix. Then you get into the North American wolves and you go from the east to the west. And if you go from eastern Atlantic, the tundra, the Rocky Mountain, the western boreal forests, the western coast, and then you get into the arid lands, which is the deserts. That's that Mexican gray wolf right there is all that pink. You can see it is the most unique North American wolf genetically, and it is. It's very different. Then you get into the Eurasian wolves, which you go from the Spanish, which are unique, Italian, the Balkans, Eastern, Northern, all of that. You get over all the way to China. And now we have information about the Himalayan wolf, which is a unique wolf in its own right, completely separate, almost like a Mexican gray. They have their own language and their own calls like no other wolf on Earth. So they've been recognized as a different genetic aspect as well. So in ancient basal, and so ancient breeds are the 13 breeds that have existed for thousands and thousands of years. There are 3 other breeds that are called basal breeds. So the ancient and the basal breeds together created the base for all of the dogs that we have now. And so I'm going to blow this up as much as I can, so you might be able to see some of this. So anyway, the way to read this is if you look at the black line, the black dot in the very center, let's say, and as that line comes out, that's wolf. The next one right here, up above that line, is a Basenji. I want you to understand a Basenji is not close to a wolf because it retains that. It was a Canaan dog type of dog in the Middle East that was actually bred with East Asian wolves about 2,000 years ago or so. So the Basenji has close genetics to a wolf only because it was bred as an animal that bred with a wolf. But it gives you an idea of the mentality of that animal and how primal it is and why it behaves differently if you've ever worked with or you've had Basenjis. Okay. Then you get into this yellow grouping, which is Chow, Chinese Sharpei, Akita, Shiba, Alaskan Malamute, Greenland Sledge, Siberian Husky, Tibetan Mastiff, etc. All of these dogs right here have a similar base, although the Chow, Akitas, Shibas are different than the Malamutes, Greenland, and Siberian Huskies. So there's three groupings in there, and then you get the Tibetan Mastiffs and the Xingu. The Xigu Tibetan Mastiff lines, their ancestor and the ancestor of the Siberian Husky, one of the ancestors, are the same and go back about 30,000 years. The difference between all of these, every other dog, and the Siberian Husky and Greenland Sledge dog, those two dogs have the genetics of the Tamir wolf. Tamir wolf ceased to exist 35,000 years ago. So the Tamir wolf and the ancestor to the Husky bred together, and that's how we've got modern northern Spitz dogs. That's where they came from. So the Tamir Peninsula is actually, go back to my little map, is this area, and that Tamir wolf area was right here. Nobody goes up into there, they only come out. So the reason Siberian Huskies and Greenland Sledge dogs and all of that have maintained for 30,000 years is because nobody goes up in there. So they maintain a pure breed, basically, on their own naturally. Then you get into the next grouping, Eurasiers, Samoyeds, Finnish Spitz, Tibetan Spaniels, Lhasa Apso, Shih Tzus, Tibetan Terriers. So you're looking at the ancient primal breeds and then the basal breeds. Then you get into Norwegian Elkhounds, down to Eskimo dogs. You get into Papillon, pugs, etc. You go on around, we'll go into the terrier group, this light blue area. These are all terriers. Very closely related, everything from Glen of Vimal over to the Norwich and Norfolk. Those are all very closely related as terriers. You go around, you get into the brown areas, Anatolians, Afghans, Salukis, the sight hand types. And then you go down, let's go to the red. That's the Spanish, English, Spaniels, Cavaliers, all of those. All the way around to English setters. So you're getting further and further and further away from a wolf genetic and a wolf mentality as you go around this circle, okay? You get into the green, the collies, the Australian shepherds, the kelpies, all of those types. You get into this dark blue over here, St. Bernard, Leonberger, Bernese Mountain Dog, Greater Swiss. Those are all highly quickly related. Then you get into Great Dane and Rhodesians. Then you get Cane Corsos. You go into the Neapolitan Mastiffs, Bull Mastiffs, etc. Then you get into the American Staffordshire Terriers, Bulls, and you get all the way up here to the Boxer, the furthest thing away from a wolf you can get genetically. Okay, so that's how you read that. I want you to understand that, because that gives you a mentality, a drive, whether or not these dogs cooperate with humans a certain way or a different way. This type of information gives you that understanding of the mentality that you're working with and what works and what doesn't for them. Okay. There's all sorts of genealogy charts and stuff. I put this up here not to look at the accuracy of this, but to look at, if you look at the top line here, to mark this, then you get into all these, every one of these top lines are pricked-eared dogs or Spitz dogs, Canis familiaris, et cetera, okay? So that's where all the dogs came from, was from those wolfy looking dogs, Huskies, Green and Sledge dogs, et cetera, okay. All right, I'm stuck. There we go. Okay. Yeah, there's the Tamer wolf area. If you see this inset over at the top, that's where the Tamer wolf range was, all the way over to Alaska, frankly. And that's where the Huskies, Siberian Huskies, like Chukchi dogs, come from. So I'm gonna wrap it up. I do want to get this page at least done. So during the Pleistocene, the modern wolf predecessor existed from about 1 million years ago. The earliest archaeological evidence was in Alaska and Yukon, the East Beringian area. If you look at this map over here, what is showing as Alaska and Yukon, that was all connected to Siberia at that time. And the modern gray wolf actually existed in that Alaska Yukon area. That was its pocket. And that's where all of the modern wolves came from. In the late Pleistocene, there was a vast mammoth steppe from Spain to Canada. I showed you that, and that's where humans bumped into these animals in the first place. About 25,000 years ago, there was a gray wolf reduction, a genetic bottleneck that happened because of climate and all that stuff. So the Beringian wolf population that existed in that Alaska Yukon area, then, so the rest of them died out, bottlenecked. The guys that were in Alaska Yukon area then repopulated the rest of the world with wolves. At that time, about 15 to 25,000 years ago, the modern dog became more successful. In other words, it took over in population from the wolf, and it has stayed that way since. We have about approximately 1 billion dogs on Earth right now, and we have only 700,000 wolves of all types worldwide. So the reduction and elimination of megafauna after the last glacial mean was because of a climate swing of 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Massive, massive change. So the divergence from modern gray wolf lineage, the predecessor of what became modern dogs, is between 40 and 140,000 years before present, according to genetic evidence. We now know it's somewhere around 125 to 140,000 years ago. These are limits that they were doing with specific type of testing. We've got better testing now. Modern dogs lineage divergence somewhere, and again through genetic testing, was 27 to 40,000 years ago, although we actually have archaeological evidence of 41,500 years ago, a dog. So we know that upper limit of what we call domestication, which to me is an insult to the dogs, is somewhere around probably 45,000 years ago beginning. The wolf population of dog predecessors went from greater to then much lesser than dog populations during that time. In 2017, the nuclear genome of 3 ancient dogs show a single dog divergence between 36,900 and 41,500 years ago. So all the experiments humans were doing even prior to that with proto-dogs, with these wolves, the sister line of wolf, the humans settled on a group of dogs that showed more promise to humans. That was settled about 40,000 years ago. So all of our dogs come from that event and that time, other than the Siberian Husky, who was an outlier of the ancient Taimyr wolf and that dog. So, okay. Yeah, so Taimyr wolf evidence, genetics 35,000 years ago, they died out. Canine quote unquote domestication, we have undisputed evidence, in other words, written stuff that goes back 15,100 years ago. So undisputed, human generated, not archaeological, not genetic, not testing for age of bones and stuff like that. Actual human evidence of 15,100 years ago, which of course was already probably 30,000 years into it. Okay, let's get to this one, and then we'll stop for today. So the outliers and new discoveries, the Altai dog, which we've known about for about 100 years, was in southern Siberia. It's 33,000 years old, most closely related to dogs than wolves. Looking at the skull of these animals, you see modifications and stuff, but it's tough to know what it was. Now we have the genetics that we're able to derive from these things and show how closely related they were to wolves or dogs. So both the wolf derived from and the Altai dog are now extinct lineages. Nothing exists beyond what that animal was at that time. That dog goes around Lake Baikal area. Modern dogs show a most recent common ancestor at 32,100 years before present, other than the Husky. Genetics, so here's the clades I was talking about. Clade A contains 64% of all dogs. Clade B, 22% in Sweden and Ukraine, which, by the way, Sweden and the Ukraine sound like they're not related, but in fact, what happened, what the Vikings did 1,000 years ago and more, they traveled to the Ukraine, Kiev area, et cetera, established cities. They were called the Rus, which became Russia also. They traded and battled with the Byzantines, so the Vikings were pretty widespread. They brought those animals with them. So Sweden and Ukraine. Clade C, 12% of Germany, and Clade D, there's only 2 breeds from Scandinavia that are in that clade. So the European origin, 78% of modern dogs are based from Europe, and that goes back up to 32,000 years ago. The Goyet dog, which is a cave in Belgium, that animal was discovered about 100 years ago, was thought to be just a mutated wolf. Existed 36,000 years ago. It was actually what we see is that it's more related to dog than wolf now. So it was possibly an aborted domestication attempt. In other words, unsuccessful. I will briefly mention Heinrich events. If you haven't understood about what a Heinrich event is, it's actually in our galaxy, there's a plane that the spiral arms actually go up and down above and below that plane, the central core of our galaxy, on a natural timeline and basis. And those Heinrich events coincide with whether we're at the lowest point in the center or above, and that goes on believe around a 23,000 year cycle, somewhere in there. And we know that there are other stuff out there outside of our the plane of our particular solar system, that when we travel above or below, we run into things. That's where these asteroids hitting Earth, et cetera, come from, are these Heinrich events, and they go on a pretty natural timeline. And so these events that happened 37, 29, 23, 16,500, 12,000 years ago, the end of the last ice age was actually caused by an asteroid that hit a massive ice dam lake area in Canada and flowed out billions and billions of gallons that actually turned the Gulf of Mexico into fresh water. That's how much water there was. And that's what ended the last ice age, even though it was going that direction. So a number of these things, a lot of the changes of animals, of now canids that we see in humans, go around this Heinrich event timeline. So anyway, you can look that up. I'm just going to throw that out to you. In 2015, the Zokov Island study of wolf specimen remains from 400,000 years ago to 8,700 years ago. There were mitochondrial DNA haplotypes of the 8,700-year-old specimens and several of the 28,000 year ago specimens matched with widely spread modern dogs. So Zokov Island is one of those islands that used to be a peninsula in Siberia, in the Arctic Ocean. And so that peninsula, they've found a number of specimens, including proto-dogs buried with humans, go back tens of thousands of years ago, et cetera, et cetera. One of the 47,000-year-old canids was distinct from wolves and only a few mutations away from modern dogs. Modern Siberian dog pool from Canis variabilis. That's the husky base right there. It goes back 47,000 years. So these animals that we have in our house are still mentally like they're living 47,000 years ago. They don't know about our modern society. They don't understand our agreements that our neighbor isn't going to come over and kill us and take our territory too. You can't think like a human when you're working with a dog. You have to think like a dog. You have to understand their base and background. That's why I go into this in such heavy format. Okay. The Newgrange dog, which is in the UK, Ireland, England area, Newgrange dog was 4,800 years ago. It was a male. There are no modern descendants. It died out. So in other words, it was replaced by that Central Asian core of animals, and it was one of the last places because it was the British Isles. And so the Newgrange dog was probably the last of the European experiments. But here's the important part. That animal was able to process starch more than wolves, but less than modern dogs. So starch is grains, those sorts of things. Okay. So humans, dogs that lived with humans for the time where we began domesticating grain, in other words, taking grasses and making wheat and oats and barley and all that stuff out of them, specializing in growing stuff in a location instead of being a hunter-gatherer, roaming groups. We stayed in one place. Well, the dogs that we wanted with us then to protect our territory and to alert us of other humans, dogs, wolves, whatever coming around, those animals had to learn to survive by eating that starch, just like humans did. Our amylase developed because we started eating grass where we didn't before. And so 10,000 years ago, we started developing these different amylase and enzymes to be able to process those grains. Well, the dogs that lived with us also had to learn to do that, although they don't have as much as we do. Siberian Huskies have none. So the ancient breed dogs, the ones that are those 13, have no processing capability of grains. It becomes an irritant to their digestive system because it actually creates cancer in them. So a grain-free diet for an ancient breed dog is absolutely appropriate. Okay, they cannot process it. It's just, and you know what starch is? Starch is basically a complex sugar. So it breaks the, if the body can break down that starch, that carbohydrate into sugar, it uses it first, and it doesn't use fat stores, which is why we get fat. So we're actually breaking the normal chain of how our bodies are supposed to use food and what we do. We were hunter-gatherers. We ate mostly meats, frankly, and fruits and nuts and roots and stuff like that we could get a hold of. Dogs, pure predators. Yeah, they ate some stuff that wasn't meat because they had to survive and they needed other stuff too, but mostly it was meat. So I just want you to understand that from that standpoint. So yeah, the hunting versus the agricultural uses, there are different sources of food, and therefore the genetics of that animal has changed to be able to live with us to process those things. That's what I want you to understand. All right. Last one, I promise. So in 2018, we had a chromosome study, Y chromosome, a haplogroup divergence from gray wolf between 68,000 to 151,000 years ago. That's the latest thing we have. So we are averaging, we're looking at it, we're looking at the history of things, and we're seeing the other studies, and I am estimating around 142,000 years ago was the divergence from what became modern gray wolves. So our line of dogs goes back 142,000 years. Other animal domestication didn't begin until about 11,000 years ago. The Yana River wolf was again, Siberia, about 33,000 years ago, closely related to the Tamer wolf and modern sled dogs. Surprise, same genetics. Okay. There is no evidence of sled dogs and wolf admixture after 9,500 years ago. None. Which means the Malamutes came into being around that time because they were actually mixed with wolves to make them larger draft animals. So Malamutes go back about 9,500 years. They came from husky-like animals that go back 35, 40,000 years. Japanese dog, sled dogs, there's no adaptation to starch, but an adaptation to high fats and fatty acids. Makes sense. What do they eat? Seal, blubber, fish, that's their diet. That's how they survive. Japanese dogs go back 9,500 years. Central Asian dogs, the modern Central Asian dogs, not the ones that went to Europe, go back about 8,000 years. Africa, the dogs entered around 5,900 years ago. We know that Salukis and Sighthounds go back about 5,500 years ago. We have the archaeological evidence of them, as well as the writings from Egypt about 5,500 years ago is when those specific dogs were bred for specific sighthound use, hunting. Eastern Asian dogs about 14,000 years ago. That's the Central Eastern Asian grouping that went to Europe mainly. Southeast Asian dogs about 7,000 years ago, and then the heavy European dog population turnover after 15 to 9,000 years ago. Okay, so now you know a little bit about the history and genetics of dogs. And those are Chukchi dogs. The Chukchi were the people who about 3,000 years ago that we know of were using the Huskies, etc., as sled dogs. It goes back much, much, much further than that. Modern Chukchis are Siberian Huskies. There's the Greenland sledge dog, which is essentially a Husky in Greenland. Tibetan Mastiffs. These were the first ones in the US in the 1950s, late 50s. These were given by the government of Tibet when it was separate from China to President Eisenhower. That's what they looked like back then. That's what they look like now. So humans continue to screw up dogs just because we want to. And anyway, modern Huskies, wolf dogs. This is one of my pack walks that I just invited open public, and surprise, we had wolf dogs and Huskies and Malamutes and everything else, plus a pit bull here and there. So a little bit of my pack. Typical home scene. Falcon, the wolf dog, with his mouth over one of my Huskies. Big boy, sweet dog, really great animal. So we will stop there so I remember my place. And I appreciate the opportunity to share this with you guys. Let me know on Telegram if you have a problem with starting an hour earlier next time, okay? And we will maintain that time. So it'd be 11 Central for here in this area on Sunday. And we will hopefully go straight through on this, no skips between weekends. I don't see anything in the way, unless I didn't pick up on a, I don't think there's a vacation or a holiday or anything during this time, at least here in the US. So anyway, I want to thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your information, your stories. And I will see you guys next Sunday, 11, hopefully, Central. And I hope you've gotten something worthy of thought out of this so far. We will get into the deep weeds next time on the brain language motivations. Okay.
Thank you. Bravo. Bravo. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. All right. It's good to see all of you.
Thank you.
Next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.